Lakeshore Drive. Reliant, 30 minutes 95th to downtown. I-57, 24 minutes I-80 to the merge. Bishop 428. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. In our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center, some rain falling throughout the day today. High 37. Rain changes to snow overnight. Somewhere between 2 and 4 inches could fall across the area. Low 33. It's 36 degrees officially at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 8. And Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2 on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and this is an interesting new book called Tightrope, and the authors are going to be in town in Chicago January 30th at 7 p.m. They're going to be at the Union League Club, and they're also the Union Club, I think, is the 31st, right? Union League Club
no, Thursday the 30th, 11:30 to 1:30.
Okay, Union League Club in the afternoon, and then Anderson's Bookstore at night. Got my wires crossed there. Thanks for that. Tightrope is the name of the book. As I said, Americans Reaching for Hope. The authors are Nicholas Kristof, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Times, his wife, Sheryl WuDunn. Again, Union League Club is in the afternoon. Anderson Bookshop is in the evening. We'll provide all of those details on our website and through all the social media outlets. Pleased to be joined by Nicholas Kristof and Sheryl WuDunn. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, our pleasure, Dan and Amy.
Thank you. So, we've talked a lot about, I think, some of the themes that are in your book. Dr. Richard Friedman actually had an op-ed in the New York Times the other week about the trend upward in suicide of young people. We started to go through some of the suggested reasons why that may be the case and dismissed many of them. And there seems to be something that is also present in J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, about Appalachia, that with respect to towns that have suffered during the Great Recession, and with respect to young people, there seems to be this commonality, which is there's a sense that something important is missing within them. And I wonder if how you sort of tackle that as you look at a town in Oregon that's in that sort of the same situation.
Yeah, I mean, we think that suicide rates are at a high since World War II, but you also have drug overdoses at a high. You have alcohol deaths at a high and rising, and I think that at some point these are symptoms of something larger. And that's something of a great social depression out there. And it seems strange to refer to a Great Depression at a time when the economy is doing so well and the stock market is hitting highs. But there are huge shares of Americans who are not doing well. And so we tell this story in part through the kids who were on my old school bus in rural Oregon, little town of Yamhill, Oregon, which is, deeply beloved to me. And a quarter of those kids have died. A quarter of those kids who were on the bus with me have died from drugs, alcohol, and suicide and related pathologies. And, that wasn't one town's problem. That's a nation's problem. Life expectancy is actually falling in the U.S. now for 3 years in a row, which didn't happen during the Great Depression, which hasn't happened actually in 100 years. So there's a deep malaise there, and it can't be addressed just as a suicide matter, just as a drug matter, but it has to be addressed as a broader Great Depression out there afflicting many Americans.
Well, but you focus on these 5 Knapp kids, Farland, Zeeland, Regina. Is really a fascinating way, and what happened to them. Can you tell us?
Yeah, so these were the kids who got on the school bus right after I did. The Knapp kids. Farland was in my grade, very talented woodmaker. The Knapp family had done really well in the previous decades. They'd bought their own home. When Farland turned 16, he got a Ford Mustang for his birthday. We were all jealous. And then they all kind of floundered in the labor market. None graduated from high school. They couldn't get union jobs the way their dad had. Farland self-medicated with drugs and alcohol, and he died as a result in 2009. His brother Zealand died in a house fire when he was passed out drunk. Regina died from hepatitis linked to drug use. And the younger brother Nathan blew himself up making meth. The only survivor of these 5 kids was Keelan, the youngest, who survived because he was in the Oregon State Penitentiary for 13 years. And, that wasn't just one family. There was another family on my school bus also with 5 kids, and also 4 of those 5 are gone. So, they're emblematic of this broader problem in the country that has left an awful lot of people behind. And, did they make mistakes? Absolutely. But so has the country in terms of policy.
Well, so there's the issue of family disintegration, but there's still this nagging problem of even when there isn't family disintegration, even when it isn't economically driven. So it's been pointed out by a number of op-ed writers that the rate of suicide among young people in Silicon Valley is 6x the national average. So these are young people that are coming from well-to-do environments and not facing the economic hardships you're describing in this town in rural Oregon. So there's something else going on.
There's a lot going on, and I think it's a tale of two Americas. Certainly in Silicon Valley, the young kids may be, I don't know what their socioeconomic background is, but it could be that they're feeling a lot of pressure to perform, and that's a terrible situation. But in general, the suicides are coming in certain areas. There's been some really interesting data by Angus Deaton and Ann Case, 2 economists at Princeton, who have looked at census data, and they have mapped out where a lot of these suicides from what they call jets of despair are coming from, and they tend to be in the more disadvantaged, afflicted areas, the ones that voted for Trump. So it is a nationwide problem, and there are individual circumstances in each case, but in general, we are not seeing this in countries abroad, our peer countries. Every country has some suicide, every country has some drug overdose and deaths related to alcohol, but not nearly to the degree that the U.S. does.
It seems to me, too, in our political discourse, both parties for a long time were sort of dismissive of the lives of people who weren't in their social circles. So Mitt Romney, I think, is a fairly good example where the emphasis was like everybody should become an entrepreneur. Well, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And fast forward to today, and it's Joe Biden telling coal miners that if they can go 2,000 feet below the Earth's surface, then they can learn how to code. It's just very, very dismissive of people who are living lives different than many of the elites in public office and heading up the civic institutions that are supposed to form the backbone of our civilization.
I think that's exactly right. And, there is a lot of talk in the political system about the middle class, and that's important because, the middle class is to some degree being hollowed out. There's not a lot of talk at all about the working class, those kind of one notch down. That's a term that really doesn't get mentioned. There's a lot of talk about improving college access, which is critical. We need to do that. But there's very little conversation about the fact that 1 in 7 kids still doesn't graduate from high school. And, if you don't graduate from high school in 2020, you are cooked.
Yeah. I'm sorry, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, right, exactly. No, I was going to add that, perhaps Joe Biden's comment seemed dismissive. I actually didn't hear him say it, but on the other hand, at least he's trying to reach out to these coal miners to say, we need to retrain you. And that is a really key point. is retraining for jobs that are being lost. Yes, globalization is affecting the U.S. It did affect other countries as well. But in Canada and Western Europe, you had much better retraining programs so that you can take some of these people who were laid off in these older industries and really focus on retraining them for jobs that are in demand in their local areas. And we just don't take that very seriously.
Yeah, I think part of it is that there's some disagreement about whether these old industries should disappear. And this was sort of, in part, Trump's rhetoric about revitalizing the steel industry and so on and so forth, whether you agree with the tariff policy is the way to do that or not. I don't. But nonetheless, the idea that we shouldn't be self-sufficient with respect to energy policy and the old Midwest industrial base, there's some disagreement. You know, there are guys that are 50 years old and have been in a coal mine for 30 years that are not necessarily going to warm to, your job is over, now you go learn how to code. And I think the way that they're addressed is highly disrespectful.
You know, I think that there is a point there, and that what a lot of these workers want is not sympathy, but is dignity, is respect.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right on that. But I do think that it's also true that we need to do a better job of thinking ahead about retraining. And one example that we use in Tightrope is of auto workers who lost their jobs in both Detroit and across the border in Windsor, Canada, during the Great Recession. And on the U.S. side, we essentially extended unemployment benefits. And on the Canadian side, what they focused on was offering retraining. And it was about starting job fairs and telling people, you know, kind of bluntly that, look, we don't, you know, you're a welder, but we don't anticipate there's going to be a lot of need for welders in Ontario in the coming decades. However, there is going to be a need for healthcare workers, and we can help you get a job in healthcare. We can start you retraining on Monday, and then you can, you know, work in a local hospital one day a week. And it, you know, you're right that it's not for everybody. It's hard to reimagine oneself, but at the end of the day, that experiment on the Canadian side versus Detroit side meant that those workers on the Canadian side were much better off, and their families less affected by breakdown, by self-medication, and so on.
I wanted to get your take, because I know in the book, Tightrope, that you talk about sort of case studies of these little platoons of democracy that have helped people turn their lives around when perhaps they have made bad decisions. They've been in a bad family environment, and that put them on a bad path to make some of those bad decisions. We certainly have talked to a number of people like that on this show, and one example is John Ponder, just to put a face to it from my perspective. John Ponder, who spent most of his life in prison between the age of 12 and 38, and after he got out the last time and devoted his life to Christ, actually, he started a program called Hope for Prisoners in Las Vegas. And one of the insights he had was partnering ex-offenders with law enforcement in a sort of a mentorship relationship. So there was a bond of trust that was actually built between them, 18-month intensive program. And over the last half a dozen years now, the recidivism rate for Hope for Prisoners graduates is like 6%, which is, of course, a fraction of the overall recidivism rate in the country. And so there are these people that are doing innovative things at the local granular level that could be replicated and scaled.
Absolutely. We actually talk about one program in Tulsa, Oklahoma in Tightrope, and it's a remarkable one called Women in Recovery. It takes women it actually diverts them from prison, where, yes, they have committed crimes, but it says, look, what we understand is that the reason you committed the crime is because the underlying reason is that you actually have an addiction, and we actually want to treat your addiction. They put them in this 2-year program. They have to commit to it. They have to go every single day, and they go through therapy. They go through classes. It helps them reintegrate back into society. And again, the recidivism rate from that program is like 4% over 3 years. It's really amazing. And exactly, these are the types of programs we need to replicate around the country. And we can't just do that with personal philanthropy. We need something much more systematic.
And so what is that? What does that look like? The program in Tulsa or the program I mentioned in Vegas? How do we scale those type of programs that have proven up to be successful models?
Well, right now, this program in Tulsa, they are collecting 10 years data. They don't have quite 10 years yet, but they are building a template so that it can just be adopted by other cities. And around the country, there are major cities that are adopting similar programs that basically divert people from prison when they know that what the people really need is mental health services or drug treatment, because it's a much more effective and cost-saving program in the end when you don't have to keep someone in prison for all those years. The high cost of the drug treatment is not great in the first few years, but it pays off in the long run. And so there is a recognition that it has to be spread around more, but we need much more support and resources from the federal government to somehow partner with localities to implement these programs.
How much of what people like Charles Murray have argued, Tim Carney had a piece in the Washington Examiner to this effect as well, Charles Murray most recently in Coming Apart, where you have people that do not preach what they practice, particularly liberals who are successful in life, financially independent, mainly follow the model that works, which is they have intact two-parent families that are raising kids and sending them to good schools, sacrificing for them, but they don't seem to preach that as much. Is that something that is a part of arguing for a model that we know works, just in terms of cultural impact?
Yeah, I mean, this is a sort of interesting phenomenon that it's called so talk left, walk right. So that liberals like myself tend to tend to be very tolerant about all kinds of family arrangements, etc. But actually, educated liberals tend to adopt very traditional lifestyles for themselves. They, complete education, wait until marriage to have children, etc., etc. Whereas conservatives tend to do the opposite, that they, especially less educated conservatives in the South, so talk right, but walk left, but don't adhere to their admonitions. And Murray and others are one of the things conservatives basically got right over the last 50 years was the importance of family structure, and that boys in particular have better outcomes when they're raised in a two-parent household. I think where they got wrong was the prescriptions that marriage counseling and advocacy were not very effective in improving marriage rates. What tended to work was giving people better jobs so that they were more marriageable, and helping at-risk teenagers with family planning so that if you don't get pregnant and have a baby at 16 and 17, you're more likely to form a solid marriage in your 20s.
The book is Tightrope, America Reaching for Hope. The author is Nicholas Kristof, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Times, his wife Sheryl WuDunn. And they are going to be in Chicago. Let's see if I can get this right this time. Union League Club, Thursday, 11:30, Thursday, January 30th at 11:30. And then Anderson's bookstore in Naperville, 1635 Emerson Lane in Naperville, at the Community Christian Church at 7 o'clock on that same day, January 30th. And we'll post all this on social media so you have it. Nicholas Kristof and Sheryl WuDunn, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with the book.
Thanks so much,
Dan and Amy.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. And they joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Real travel is life-changing. With Trafalgar, you'll discover the best way to travel and connect with the culture, people, and places you visit. You'll travel with the freedom to discover and the confidence to explore. With over 300 trips on all 7 continents, you get real experiences that you won't find elsewhere. These are just a few of the greatest travel stories you'll ever tell. Save up to 7.5% on trips. Terms and conditions apply. Visit your travel agent or Trafalgar.com. Trafalgar, simply the best.
This is a Jackson Hewitt tax service announcement. Don't want to wait weeks for your tax refund? That's a reason to go to Jackson Hewitt Tax Service. File your taxes with Jackson Hewitt and ask a tax pro how you could get up to $3,200 fast with a no-fee refund advance. It's a 0% APR loan from MetaBank that's available before your tax refund is, so you could get